we need to demand, I would say, immediately, not squeaking one bill through with reconciliation, but ending the filibuster. We need to demand the Employee Free Choice Act immediately. We need to demand single payer or the closest thing to it. It is the place of Congress members to work with their colleagues and compromise. It is not our place. We need to demand commitments. We don't need, when you talk to your Congress members, you want hard yes or no's on things that they can be held to. You don't want nice, pleasant words. It's absolutely of no use. And we need to organize seriously what my friends in a group called the Backbone Campaign call thank and spank campaigns. That is, they need to know that if they do something they've committed to, like voting no if there's no good public option, they're going to be punished for it. If they do it right, they're going to be thanked. If they don't do it, they're going to be punished for it. You know, back in June, there was this bill on a supplemental bill on the war, right? We had a new president, the anti-war president. He produced the biggest military budget in the history of the universe. And one rationale for that was that we weren't going to have the supplementals anymore. But, okay, we do have to have this one more supplemental for this year, and then when we get to next year, we won't have them anymore. They'll be in the regular budget. You had Congress members voting yes for the reason that it was the last one. It's a horrible, horrible thing, but because it's the last one, I'll vote yes. You had Congress members like Jan Schakowsky, who always voted against the war money, voting yes to please her president. It's her public statement, right? To please my president, right? So the legislature, whose will is to be executed by the executive, is legislating what the executive tells them to legislate. It's a reversal of a democratic system, just as the activist groups are reversing our relationship. And so you had this fight over this supplemental, and you had 51 Democrats vote no and run home and say, I voted no, I'm for peace. Because it passed so easily, because all the Republicans vote yes for wars, right? Then it goes to the Senate, then they add in this IMF bailout for Eastern European banksters. Just so you know, it's good for Wall Street, it's good for Poland, right? So it comes back to the House. Now, every single Republican is going to vote no. Not because their analysis of the IMF is yours and mine, but because they don't like spending money on something other than war. All of a sudden they're talking about the money involved. And so they can't have 51 Democrats vote no anymore, right? If they have 38, they're okay. If they have 39, the bill's stopped. They have to at least split the two things apart and try and pass each of them separately. So we have a fight. And we have all the activist groups working together for the first time, beautifully, surprised all of us how skillfully and cooperatively everybody worked. And a website called Fire Dog Lake was keeping a public whip list. And we whipped these people. And they had cabinet secretaries and generals and presidents and the chief of staff of the White House and the leadership in Congress do almost nothing for about a week but try to pass this bill. And they made threats and they made promises. And they threatened to take away money. And they threatened to run challengers. And they made promises of, we'll send generals and cabinet officers down to your district to do press events with you after you vote yes. And they're still paying off some of this stuff. And in the end, we kept 30. We needed 39, and we kept 30. So we had a very easy opportunity, and we worked better than I've seen before. And that's the encouraging part, because we're going to build on that. But we still lost. And then we had a list of 30 who were heroes, who needed to be thanked in a serious way. And we had a list, not just the entire rest of the Congress, but we had a particular list of 21 phonies, of 21 who pretend to oppose wars but don't, not when push comes to shove. That was when we had to punish them. We had to go after them in their local media. We had to start coming up with challengers to them, and we didn't do it. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody was interested in doing it. These progressive groups that were interested in this fight and did it remarkably well didn't want to go after these Congress members because they considered them progressive and because there were other Congress members who were worse. If we see the same thing after this public option, if we don't thank anybody and we don't spank anybody, then even if the Progressive Caucus has suddenly become something that has to be listened to, we haven't yet. So we have to have the follow-through. I think we're learning this. I think we're waking up. I think people who've been asleep for 6 or 7 months and thought that that was their responsible and respectful duty are snapping out of it. I'm getting encouraged now as some people are getting discouraged, and it's their discouragement that's encouraging me because I think they're going to get active the way that we always should have been. I think I'm glad I chose Daybreak for a title of my book. I think we can start thinking in those terms. I think within a couple of years, this country is going to be dramatically better or worse in terms of our government. And it's not gonna be anywhere near the same. So let's make it better. I'll take any questions you guys have got. And feel free to introduce yourself or not, whatever.
My name is Karen, and could you say something about this hugely critical case that's going before the Supreme Court? I mean, it seems like so much hinges on that.
I lay out strategies in my book for going in the opposite direction of where it seems like they want to be going, right? I look at all sorts of rights in constitutions and how our Constitution was really groundbreaking, but isn't anymore, right? I mean, and you have a constitution in Ecuador gives the environment rights.
Right.
Not us environmental rights, but gives the environment rights.
Right.
Oh, is that in the Bible? Aren't rights for humans, right? But we give rights to corporations. We make corporations into persons with human rights because of an intentional misreading of a Supreme Court ruling many years ago. And then we make money speech. Right, this is an even more magical sort of transformation than making corporations humans. We make money speech, and then we say that corporations have the civil right to speech by spending money. But we do have some restrictions. We do have some restrictions that make sense. Don't go far enough. We ought to eliminate corporations as humans with human rights, and we ought to eliminate the idea that money is speech. But as long as you've got that, you ought to at least say that the money corporations dump into election campaigns should have been raised for that general purpose. It shouldn't just be their general fund, because then they could just swamp the whole system. ExxonMobil could spend 1% of its money and just swamp the entire spending of everything, you know. And that's what it looks like. At least 5 members of the Supreme Court, which is all it takes, have a real intention of doing, of explicitly overturning a number of precedents with what they would denounce as judicial activism if it did anybody any good. And it's going to make things significantly worse, or it's going to mobilize us to finally get rid of corporate personhood. And there are going to be other cases that provide that opportunity to get rid of corporate personhood, but it's not clear whether this is a court that's willing to do it. The only way we can do it without the Supreme Court, once the Supreme Court has had its say, is to amend our Constitution. And the people who wrote it thought it would be amended quite frequently. They would be shocked at the way we treat it as a sacred document, despite its outdatedness, and we ought to be amending it, and there are ways that we can and must. But I think, you know, regardless of how this ruling goes right now, our system is going to be increasingly corrupted by money, because not only do they dump substantially more money in every cycle. I mean, the inflation rate on election spending is going up beyond anything. I mean, housing and nothing ever came close. I mean, it's just doubling and tripling, and you're reaching a point where lots of candidates are spending all they think makes any sense to spend. They're saturating the airwaves, and corporate interests are finding lots of other creative places to put their money. They can buy forged letters from grassroots groups arguing against greenhouse gas controls. They can fund the Heritage Foundation to say that if you control greenhouse gases, gasoline will cost $4 and you won't be able to heat your home. And then they can go out and have a front group organize rallies of citizens who are mad about the $4 a gallon gasoline. Then they can call up their buddies in the corporate media and say, hey, can you go cover this rally? then they can buy the ads that are shown in between the stories about their